What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Great Encore. My name is Brandon Crossland from Raceface Digital, here on another Motor Monday with Tanner Smith from Pitbox Press, filling in for our beloved Ben Schneider this evening, and also someone that we never get to see here on Grid Encore, but always a treat to have the one, the only Kobe Lambeth here making a special appearance from Grid tonight. How's everything going, guys?
Pretty well.
Yeah, going well here as well. Just ready to get the show started.
Yeah, good to see some smiling faces here after a very eventful day in the world of motorsport that we will get to here very shortly. Before we do so, we'll start by thanking our Patreon supporters, though. We got to thank Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, David, and of course, Matthew. You see they're there on the left of your screen. We really appreciate everyone who has invested or taken time to support Grid Network, and consider joining them if you'd like to see, if you like what you see here on our show tonight. You can also make a donation using Buy Me a Coffee or our YouTube Super Chat function if you're watching us here live on the air. Every little amount helps us grow and continue to produce these shows each and every week. So before we jump into All-Star Weekend at North Wilkesboro, let's talk about yesterday's qualifying for the 109th running of the Indianapolis 500 and the drama that followed. And before we get into the pole winner, we have to address the elephant in the room. Yesterday was a day to forget for Team Penske. As you know, all three drivers, Scott McLaughlin, Joseph Newgarden, and Will Power, advanced to the top 12 qualifying session. McLaughlin crashed out in the pre-qualifying practice, so he didn't get to participate. Then Newgarden and Power both failed technical inspection and weren't allowed to set a time. IndyCar said the issue was an unapproved body fit on the rear attenuator of the race car. Originally, the three Penske drivers were all going to start on row 4, but this morning, IndyCar announced penalties. Newgarden and Power were both pushed to the back of the grid for the race, starting 32nd and 33rd on row 11. Both teams also got last choice in pit box selections, received a $100,000 fine, lost their qualifying points, and both team strategists Tim Cindric and Ron Rzuski were suspended from the Indy 500. McLaughlin gets to keep his 10th place starting spot on row 4, though, because IndyCar found nothing wrong with the Yellow Submarine's attenuator. Given last year's push-to-pass scandal and then new information that's emerged just this morning regarding Newgarden's 2024 Indy 500 winning race car, how bad does this situation look for Team Penske and the series as a whole? It's I can honestly say, I think probably from all of our experience around covering IndyCar, this has to be one of the most bombshell stories to come out in quite some time. We'll start with Tanner. What is your take on the events this morning and yesterday?
I should probably clarify before going any further that I come from the NASCAR community primarily, and over there, ingenuity such as this is celebrated, even if it is also disciplined. So I may have a bit of a different take on this than everybody else, but I have not really gotten a completely clear answer on how this particular part and how it was modified would give the team an uncompetitive advantage. So with that in mind, I just feel like a lot of it and a lot of the surrounding media attention surrounding this event has been more so because of the potential conflicts of interests of it all. Obviously, there have been people that have been trying to take high-res photos and upscale them to try to get a better glimpse at Joseph Newgarden's attenuator from last year's 2024 Indy 500. And what I'm going to address about that situation is that we should not be adjudicating a race after a car passed tech both before that race and afterwards and was already awarded the victory. This is not a similar situation to me to the push-to-pass scandal from last season, because that was a bit more of a, you would have had to know the coding of the car to know that they were abusing push-to-pass at St. Petersburg last year. So I don't think that aspect of all this is relevant in any way. As for this year, you do have people like Chip Ganassi saying that when the 3-car and its tattered carcass was brought back to the garage area yesterday, that allegedly he saw them pull something off the car. And I'm just so sick of this hearsay nonsense. Like, I feel like every one of those 33 cars has some sort of modification to it that is probably bending or even in some cases breaking a rule. It is the entire nature of motorsports that you are supposed to bend the rules as much as possible to gain an advantage on your competitors, because let's be honest, if all 33 of those cars were built and engineered exactly the same way, it'd be a very, very boring race. So, with all that in mind, I think that what we saw today is just, a bit more of a backlash towards Penske Entertainment owning the sport itself, and everything that kind of comes with that and the potential conflicts of interest that could provoke, rather than asking the right questions, which are, how much of an advantage was the two allegedly getting last year and through this year's qualifying period, rather than bad Penske, more or less. So I would prefer if we had a bit more of a broader discussion on what competitive advantages, the attenuator being potentially adjusted or being malformed, how that could have happened in a normal way, because I just feel like not enough has been pointed towards, any of the competitive aspects of this penalty rather than, the surrounding capers that could be, sprouting off from it.
Yeah, Tanner, I think that's an entirely fair question to ask. None of us on the air tonight have engineering backgrounds or degrees from universities in engineering. So, I'll tell you, science was not my best subject in school. So I can't really tell you what competitive advantage the attenuator would have had here. And that's something I would like an engineering mind to explain to me and all of us. Like how would this potentially, give Team Penske more speed and help them out in qualifying? I'm not really sure, but at the end of the day, the rules are the rules, and these two cars found to violated the rules, and IndyCar decided to, penalize them for it. And interesting, set of penalties here. $100,000 fine, as you mentioned, Brandon. Loss of pit box selection, dropping to the rear of the field. And IndyCar paddock, seeing some of the reactions today, not really happy at all. Pato O'Ward, was fired up about this. He even suggested that Will Power and Joseph Newgarden should have been pushed to the last row shootout, which Doug Bowles, shot down and, saying like that really wouldn't make any sense in this situation. And since they had already locked into the field in Saturday's qualifying session, they passed tech with flying colors, no problems at all detected there. So Doug Bowles, the president of IndyCar, to his credit, really happy that he got out there this morning, spoke to the media, went on TV as well during practice to talk about the situation, not hiding behind closed doors, to try to be as open and transparent about the process that IndyCar went through. And one thing that I wanted to note, IndyCar originally, said that that any penalties were not going to be announced until, after the Indy 500, like heading to Detroit. But obviously overnight something changed, because Doug Bowles said, they want to protect, the integrity of the Indianapolis 500 and the IndyCar series. So they felt that despite, saying that, hey, we're just going to kick the can down the road and wait to Detroit, we're going to take action right now, within, hours, of this happening. So I'm really happy that they decided to move forward with this. But from an optics standpoint and a conflict of interest, not really a good look, especially given, the push to pass scandal that happened last year, like just in 2024. And then here's another scandal involving the same team, just 1 year later. And given who owns the series, it's just not a good look for them from an optics standpoint. And I understand why the teams are, and some of the drivers from other teams are very frustrated with what's going on. And it's also comments, in the Associated Press from Scott Dixon saying that, a bit of a theme is emerging here, given it's the same team, the same, same people involved. Interesting, the strategist Tim Cindric, Ron Rzuski, they were the same ones who were in trouble with the push to pass scandal, and now they're in trouble again. And I'm starting to wonder, like, since Cindric and Rzuski, were a part of this situation, and just in 2 consecutive years, what's Roger Penske going to do to them? Like, are these two going to end up keeping their jobs, or is Roger going to have to be forced to move on from them? Because at this point, it's just embarrassing for the organization to be going through this. And in regards to what's going on with Joseph Newgarden's car from last year, there's really no way of knowing what went on there. And saw several reporters go down to the IMS museum, snap some shots of the car showing the same illegal part. if that, is an illegal part from last year, it's definitely going to raise a lot of questions, even more questions about Team Penske. But I'm not really sure if they're going to go back and take that car out of the museum to examine it, because like, what good is it going to do one year later? I don't really think they're going to go down that route. Just try to move forward and make sure that we're protecting the integrity of the series. But definitely a disappointing situation for Team Penske.
Yeah, this entire day is like really like spiraled into huge proportions. I've followed Doug Bowles' love for the Speedway over the years, and I have never, in my recollection, ever remember seeing him so on edge, so ready to protect the integrity of the sport and of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It's been a very hectic day, and I'm sure there's lots of folks there at the facility that are still going to be losing sleep tonight over the whole events. Tanner, do you have another word about it?
Yeah, and it has more to do with like the drivers that are obviously not employed by Team Penske and their reactions to all of this. I really don't care for it, and I actually don't want to hear it. Like I said, I think all 33 cars out there are pushing the envelopes, maybe not Renus VK's car necessarily, but the other 32, I think, are out there absolutely pushing the absolute limits of their equipment and the rule book. And unless you are personally in the car during the week, ratcheting things on and, working with the engineers to physically, develop the parts and put them together in a certain way, I really don't want to hear your opinion on engineering. Like, the same things could be happening to your car and you don't even know about it. Like, I just have to imagine, if we're talking about a Dallara supplied part, which we are in the attenuator, they are probably not the only team in Team Penske getting this kind of advantage through this part. I just think that based on the law of averages, that's more than likely the case. So I really just don't care about what any of the drivers have to say about this, because they're not involved in the construction and engineerings of the car. They kind of just tell them the vibe of the car that they like the most and what they like to get out of it. And that's usually the end of it. Obviously, there are some drivers that are a little bit more ingratiated into that process than others. But at the end of the day, I just don't think it's fair to be like, oh, well, they're the only team that's gotten, dinged for penalties anytime in the last 2 years. Well, that just means your team's better at not getting caught for it. Like that to me is what it comes down to at the end of the day.
Yeah, I can agree a lot with the Fox Sports crew this morning, and the kind of their frustration there in the booth. A lot more questions than answers. Kobe, what do we have from you?
All I was going to say is that, yeah, I think these teams, regardless of what series they are, whether it's IndyCar, NASCAR, F1, Formula E, supercars, these teams are always, going to be pushing the limit. They're going to try to exploit the rule book, as often as they can, to try to be like, hey, can we get away with this? And sometimes you get away with it, and sometimes you just don't. And, this was one of those times Team Penske wasn't able to get away with it. So I do understand that these teams really try hard to push the limits, each and every race weekend. And Team Penske did release a statement about this, saying that we accept the penalties issued today by the IndyCar Series, which are due to a body fit violation that occurred prior to the qualifying session yesterday. We are disappointed by the results and the impact it has on the organization. We'll make further announcements later this week related to personnel for the upcoming Indianapolis 500. But regardless of the penalties, I think this sets up for an interesting storyline. Joseph Newgarden, trying to become the first driver to ever win 3 consecutive Indianapolis 500s. Probably going to be difficult to pass on Sundays, and for him to try to come from the last row to try to get the three-peat, the thing is going to be fun to watch.
It sure will be, and that's why we tune in. But man, it's been a whirlwind of a day, like we said. And we go from that, though, to the history that was made as well yesterday with the first rookie pole sitter since Italian driver Teo Fabi completed the feat in 1983. Robert Shwartzman from PREMA Racing shocked the whole IndyCar paddock and the world by winning the pole thanks to a 4-lap average speed of 232.790 miles per hour. Shwartzman has never raced on an oval before, and this is PREMA's first time preparing cars for an oval race. They do have a lot of people with IndyCar experience working for the team. This was a huge turnaround for PREMA after a rough start on day one with neither car being ready to go at the start of practice last Tuesday. To go from being one of the early contenders for the last row shootout to putting cars into the field easily and winning the pole over veteran IndyCar teams, it is a remarkable accomplishment to say the least. And after the early struggles, Kobe, we actually saw you go on a rant last Tuesday and criticize PREMA for being unprepared and missing valuable track time. Where are you going? But I mean, I don't blame you. I don't blame you. From what we saw at the beginning of the week, it was like why they, if anyone needs to be out on track during these precious few days of IndyCar or Indy 500 practice, it was PREMA Racing, the brand new team in the paddock. But here they go, and I put it with the caveat of the Penske's were not applying in this case. McLaughlin out, and then the whoopsie there from 2 and 12. But Robert Shwartzman, fair and square, getting the pole here, and the first one to do it since '83. And I find it very, very cool to have this kind of scenario happen. So what do you have to say about PREMA now, Kobe?
Well, I'm going to say, dear PREMA, in the words of Shaquille O'Neal, I owe you an apology because I wasn't really familiar with your game. Like it, like it is just amazing to see how this team turned things around so quickly. Because as badly as day one went, I thought it was a sign of things to come. And I'm thinking, oh man, they say you're brand new team to the IndyCar series. Yeah, it's day one you show up. You know, your speedway car is still not completely built. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, what have you been doing for the last several days, weeks, and months? You know, preparing, you know, for your first season in IndyCar. I thought it was inexcusable at the time that they weren't ready. And still, despite the rain delay we had last Tuesday, they still weren't ready then. So, you know, they only got, you know, a small handful of laps on day one, and they were slow, you know, which wasn't a good sign. And then, you know, Wednesday, Thursday came along, Friday. Yeah, they picked up the pace a little bit, but, you know, I didn't really think, you know, that they would basically show up and show out on the Saturday qualifying session. Like, I don't think I was only one surprised. I think all of us were surprised, and I was telling some people, you know, about the scenes at Indy, you know, when Robert Shwartzman won the pole. I said that this is exactly why I love sports, you know, especially for these feel-good underdog stories, because PREMA, the week started off really bad, not having their cars ready to go, and they were at the bottom of the speed charts. And as the days went on before qualifying, you know, they still didn't really have the best speed. And I'd really like to know where on earth did that lap come from on Saturday from Callum Ilott to, you know, lock you safely into the field, and especially Robert Shwartzman first getting into the Fast 12. Did not expect that to happen. Then to get into the Firestone Fast 6, big shocker. And then for him to put it on the pole after how this week started, just absolutely remarkable by PREMA. I have to tip my hat to them for doing what they were able to do, because it's not easy at all to do what they did. You know, look at Carlin Racing, look at McLaren when they tried their one off, you know, Fernando Alonso on their own. It was a complete disaster. And I was afraid PREMA could be entering, you know, McLaren and Carlin territory of being unprepared for this situation. But they showed why, you know, people have so much respect for them across Europe in the road to F1 ladder system. Yeah, PREMA's the gold standard, you know, over there in Europe, you know, in like Formula 2, Formula 3, and some of the other series that they race in. And they knew coming to IndyCar was going to be very difficult. And I think all of these veteran IndyCar teams have been doing this, you know, for year in and year out. I think they should feel slightly embarrassed by what happened, because PREMA completely, you know, aced them at their own game. Like these guys who've been doing this for years, like your Penske's, your Ganassis, your Andretti's, you know, they're supposed to have this down packed. And then for a new team like PREMA to come in, you know, very first oval race, and we talked about during the Grid Tonight shows last week, this is PREMA's first time even building a speedway car. So this was something that they've never done before as an organization. And to build a speedway car like this, for Robert Shwartzman to put on a pole, just an absolutely remarkable thing that they were able to do. And just because PREMA, you know, is obviously still getting up to speed in IndyCar, they're on the personnel side, they're not novices at all. I know the leader of the IndyCar program is Pierre Phillips, you know, previously served in an executive role at Ray Hall, Letterman, Lanigan Racing. Ryan Briscoe's their sporting director. You know, Ryan Briscoe, you know, longtime IndyCar veteran, so he knows what he's doing. And also some in the media, they were talking about one of the top engineers at PREMA just for the Indianapolis 500 only. He used to be Joseph Newgarden's engineer, I believe, like a couple of years ago or so. and someone who has experience of working at Team Penske, you know, obviously one of the top organizations in the IndyCar series. And he actually works at SpaceX right now. So he's basically doing this for fun while he's away from
building
his
rockets.
job.
Yeah.
Yeah, building rockets. And he definitely built a rocket for Robert Shwartzman here.
Absolutely. You mentioned McLaren, and I can remember walking by the McLaren garage in 2019 when Fernando Alonso was trying that one-off. And throughout the month of May, they spent an awful lot amount of time in that garage behind the closed walls and everything, just working on it and not getting too much on-track time. And it didn't work out for them. Kyle Kaiser was able to make his way into the greatest spectacle in racing. But we saw sort of a similar thing there with Shwartzman and PREMA Racing. But how the turntables, Tanner.
Yeah, no kidding. So a lot of my immediate reaction to this can be found in yesterday's NASCAR pre-race show, because we kind of did that right after that last lap went in from Felix Rosenquist. But just to kind of run back over it, we're talking about a team that came into this season no IndyCar experience. They don't have a charter, which obviously is new this year, but still, they're not getting the money that all the other teams are getting. They have two drivers that, to my knowledge, outside of Ilott, who has very little oval experience, have no oval experience in Shwartzman in particular. They have a team that comes mostly from Formula 2, which does not have any ovals in their schedule. Everything about this team, to this point, they show hardly any pace at any of the races thus far. So you come into Indy, and kind of like Kobe alluded to, we just didn't have a whole lot of expectations for them. We thought that they'd be kind of fighting it out with the coin cars and the bump day qualifying. So for them to even make both cars into the race before bump day, that was impressive in itself. Pretty much unprecedented. Then they come in and they land one car in the Fast 12. Okay, that's really impressive. Oh, now they're in the Fast 6. Even more impressive. They're on the pole with a guy who's never been in an oval before. It's practically unprecedented. It's an exceptional story, kind of like what Kobe said. Like, this is why we watch sports. Like, we watch sports not for the dynasties and, you know, all the teams that we expect to be at the top to once again mount the summit again. We watch sports to watch new faces in new places make history, just like this. I mean, it's been 43 years. That's 15 years past my lifetime that it's been since we've seen someone be a rookie and land on the pole at Indianapolis. And to kind of live through that bit of history again is just, you know, really cool. And I think that should be everyone's takeaway from it, that this is just a really awesome, really cool moment for IndyCar. And frankly, I'm a little sad that all of this penalty controversy and all the, you know, gotcha journalism that's popped up today has kind of taken the headlines instead of what should be taking the headlines. And that is Robert Shwartzman, IndyCar rookie with a rookie team, setting the pole for the Indianapolis 500. And on top of that, apparently he is an aspiring rapper, which, again, that should be the focus today and not what we had to talk about at the beginning. But either way, tip the cap to PREMA Racing and Robert Shwartzman, and to a lesser extent Callum Ilott. They put in a fantastic effort, even with their abbreviated time that they got. And, you know, you couldn't be happier for them. That is an incredible story for this sport, and one that we should probably try focusing on the rest of the week rather than, unfortunately, what we're probably going to focus on instead.
Yeah, I love all the tidbits. It's from an Italian driver that did it in 1983 to a brand new Italian team that gets it done here this year with a Jewish driver from Tel Aviv, Robert Shwartzman. It's just a really cool story. In the last row shootout, we had 4 drivers battling for the final 3 spots. You had Marco Andretti with Andretti Global, Marcus Armstrong with Meyershank, and they were able to put themselves in the field, setting up a shootout between Dale Coyne Racing teammates Rinus VeeKay and Jacob Abel. VeeKay had taken the final spot in the field over Abel and made a surprising decision to withdraw his time from the race to make a second qualifying run, which was slower. Abel went back out again and went slower than VK, ultimately leading to the number 51 driver getting bumped from the field. Given the news about Team Penske, some believe that Jacob Abel got gypped and deserved to be in the field. During today's practice session, though, Abel joined the Fox Sports booth and said that he appreciates everyone's kind words, but he doesn't want to be in a race on a technicality, and acknowledged his team just didn't get the job done, quite simply. Abel becomes the second coin driver to miss the Indy 500 in back-to-back years, and Nolan Siegel got bumped last year, as you remember, from crashing during his qualifying run. What's going on with Dale Coyne Racing, in your opinion, starting with Tanner, and do you like how Abel is handling this situation so well?
I'll start with the last part of that. I love how Jacob Abel has been handling all of this. I think that it would be really easy to kind of play the victim in this situation and like, oh, the big bad big team, they get to get away with everything, and we did everything the right way as the little guys, and we should be in the race. It would be super easy to take that route, and instead Jacob Abel is taking the high road, and frankly I really appreciate that and find it very refreshing, because I feel like if this kind of situation happened in NASCAR, we would not be having this kind of a conversation. So definitely want to tip my cap to him and the Dale Coyne Racing team and how they've kind of handled this situation to this point. To talk about Dale Coyne Racing broadly, it's just kind of shocking how little speed that they showed up with coming into Indianapolis. Granted, they're a team that is somewhat accustomed to landing in this particular session at bump day, especially last season where they had Nolan Siegel unfortunately not make the race after a pretty scary crash during his final qualifying run, and he just simply didn't have the speed before that. I just think that it's crazy that a team that has produced a top 10 points racer this year in Rinus VK, who has a pretty extensive history of doing very well on the oval with Ed Carpenter Racing in the previous 5 years he was with that team. It's crazy that the combined minds there could not create a fast car for either entry. The only reason both of their cars made it this year is because we didn't have a 35th entrant, and that's pretty unfortunate. But at the same time, I can only hope that this extra week that the teams are going to have to hammer away at the car, figuratively, not literally, and try to make it faster will pay dividends for Rinus. But, you got to feel bad for Jacob Abel and that 51 team. Obviously, I'm sure they put in a ton of work and a lot of research and development to try to make that car fast coming into this weekend, and they just simply could not find the speed, and that's just something you hear all too often for an underfunded project like that. So, like I said, really love the professionalism and everything that Jacob Abel has shown thus far in the midst of what I would assume is a lot of media pressure. So really appreciate that. And it's been refreshing to hear from him throughout all this. But Dale Coyne in general, just get faster, man. That's the only advice I can give you. Just get faster.
Yeah, definitely. I think Jacob Abel is handling this situation as best as you possibly could, given the circumstances. Like you were saying, Tanner, it's easy to play the victim card like this. Be like, "Woe is me." You'd be like the big bad Penske's. They didn't follow the rules, but we did, so we deserve to get in the field. And Jacob Abel, he decided to take the high road, and he's like, you know what? I don't want to get in because someone else, didn't follow the rules. That I want to earn my spot in this field, and at the end of the day, regardless of whatever the other teams do, whether they had a competitive advantage or not, it's still our job to go out there and unlock as much speed as we can to try to get into the field. Unfortunately, that number 51 team wasn't able to do that. And given history, of drivers missing in the Indianapolis 500, I'm sure Jacob Abel will be back at some point. But look at Nolan Siegel after missing Indy last year. He locked himself into his first Indy 500 in qualifying. So I'm sure Jacob Abel can use that as inspiration as well. Also look at someone like Pato O'Ward who failed to miss the race in his first. He failed to make the race. Excuse me, there with my poor grammar. Yeah, so you look at Nolan Siegel last year and Pat O'Ward from several years ago as well, as inspiration. I think Jacob Abel will be fine at the end of the day, and I think he is doing a wonderful job handling this situation. In regards to Delcoin Racing, it seems like this organization has honestly fallen off a cliff, within the last couple of years or so, has, been kind of shocking. I mean, Delcoin has never been one of the top teams in the IndyCar series, but unlike a weekend, let's say strategy wise, like if you get like a time caution or something, when strategy comes into play on like a road or a street course, Delcoin, might be able to, cook up some good strategy there to try to get the car to a decent finish. We've certainly seen, them have some good runs as underdogs, and from time and time again on an oval, shows some really good speed. Remember several years ago when Sebastian Bourdais was on a potential pole winning lap before, had that horrible crash and qualifying. That shows the potential of that Delcoin organization. But as time goes on, people move around. A lot of people left Delcoin Racing for other teams in the IndyCar series or other places in general. And it seems like a lot of the talent that Delcoin used to have he doesn't have what he had in the past. So I guess maybe it's hard trying to find chemistry and try to get the talent working in the best possible way to try to extract speed from these cars. So definitely a head scratcher from that front. And Rinus VK, seeing him in the last row shootout, you don't expect to see someone like that in this position, because he's usually in the pole shootout, trying to start on the front row. But there's quite a difference between an Ed Carpenter racing car and a Delcoin racing car. And unfortunately, the car was obviously the big problem here for Rinus VK, because I guarantee you, if you put him in a fast enough car, Rinus VK would have locked this thing into the field in no time. It's a real unfortunate situation that he's in. I'm sure Rinus hopes that he can potentially land a more competitive seat for next year's Indianapolis 500, because seeing someone like VK in this high pressure situation, he frankly doesn't deserve that at all. But to his credit, he ended up getting into the race. I was kind of concerned in those final minutes. We're all scratching our heads, us wondering what on earth is he doing.
Yeah, what are you doing?
Yeah, like you're locked into the Indy 500. Like, why are you going to the fast lane to pull your time? And then when it went slower, I said, man, he's gonna get bumped from the race. But thankfully for his case, the track conditions were as that same for Jacob Abel, maybe just slightly worse. End up going slower. So all ends well there. If Rinus VK had got bumped because he pulled himself for an Indy 500, that would have been one of the biggest boneheaded decisions that we've seen on bump day in a very long time. So I'm glad it all worked out well for him there. But in regards to Delcoin Racing in general, given the recent struggles that they've had, and thinking about how IndyCar has a charter system now, if you're Delcoin, struggling with this 2-car team, I wonder if you consider maybe selling a charter, try to downsize to a 1-car team and put all your resources in that to try to get try to get your program back up and running again, or maybe you've been around for so many years, you decide you just had enough. Because I know a team who won the pole for this race who could potentially be looking for 2 charters in the future. So I guess some food for thought there.
Food for thought indeed. Thank you so much, Kobe. And yeah, Jacob Abel has a lot to be hopeful for. You look at guys like James Hinchcliffe and Graham Rahal that have been in that spot before, and some of the greats in the series, and also feel bad for Miller High Life, sort of, because it was in homage to the 1985 Louisville, Kentucky's Sullivan and his spin and win in 85 there, and they were trying to throw back to that. We see Denver Thurston in his comment, IndyCar crap show again. I'm a Will Power fan, but he and Newgarden should be disqualified from the race. Poor Jacob Abel. He should have been in the Indy 500. Well, I think that's the opinion of lots of fans. As a conflict of interest rear its ugly head again, and also if Will Power or Joseph Newgarden somehow win this year, there will be an asterisk towards it in the record books. What's your quick thoughts on that, maybe, Kobe, before we say farewell tonight?
I said, well, I'll just respond to what Denver said at first. That's saying Jacob Abel should be in the race. Doug Bowles, when he was speaking to the media, he was saying, that he's a traditionalist and believe that it should only be the field of 33 in the Indianapolis 500, and that he doesn't, it's actually a non-starter to have a discussion, be like, oh, we feel bad for Jacob Abel, so we're just going to create a 34th spot for him in this race. So that's definitely not happening at all. And Jacob Abel himself, as we already talked about, yeah, he's disappointed that he didn't make the race, but he's choosing to be positive, use this as a learning experience so he can come back stronger next year to try to get into the race for the very first time. And Denver, yeah, I agree with you that that this is obviously a bad conflict of interest, and we also saw some chatter, in the last few days about IndyCar potentially looking into having an independent governing body, to make these decisions, who are not Penske Entertainment employees, to try to cut down on some of the conflict of interest, which I think would be really good from an optics perspective. And last comment about Will Power and Joseph Newgarden, if they were to win this year, how I guess their win would be a potential win would potentially be tainted in a certain way. Yeah, I understand why some people may like shake their heads at that type of stuff, especially looking at Joseph Newgarden's 2 Indianapolis 500 wins. Yeah, I know last year, a lot of people looked at him because of the push to pass thing, and then the year before that, that perfectly timed caution that allowed him to get that one lap shootout around Marcus Ericsson. Marcus didn't have a chance, to fight back there. Some people, look at that, and scratch their heads. But yeah, like Tanner said, hopefully we'll be able to focus on some of the more positive storylines, like Robert Shwartzman. I think that should be the main focus on an unfortunate situation that we have to talk about. These penalties with the attenuators.
Well, it's certainly given us no shortage of things to talk about as far as IndyCar and the Indianapolis 500. Kobe Lambeth, thank you so much for making a very special appearance here on Grid Encore, and thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Brandon. Really appreciate being back on Encore. I don't know when I'll come back again, but it was an honor. You can see me again here, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time Wednesday night for our next episode of Grid Tonight.
That we can. Thank you, Mr. Kobe Lambeth, and an integral part of the Grid Network group here. We thank you very much. We head on now to the world of NASCAR. An all-star race at North Wilkesboro, as you know, left everyone talking for the right reasons. Christopher Bell, with an aggressive move, took the win over Joey Logano last night in Wilkes County. Logano admitted he was upset and wished he could have gotten to Bell's back bumper in time. Bell, despite it being a non-points race, it's his first trip to victory lane since his 3-race winning streak at the end that ended after Phoenix earlier in this season. I really enjoyed last night. All things considered, we know gimmicks are always a part of the All-Star race at some point or the other, but some hijinks with Michael Waltrip dropping the yellow flag and other things of that nature. But all that aside, could this win, in your opinion, Tanner, possibly give Joe Gibbs and team number 20 there a spark entering into the Coca-Cola 600? We sometimes see that translate all-star success going into the 600.
Well, you got to consider, for one thing, they are the defending winners of this event, and they did just finish second at Kansas, which is a track that is similar in length to Charlotte. So they've already got plenty of speed at the intermediate tracks, it seems like, and at tracks that seem to have a bit more of a aged pavement and aged surface that requires the driver to have a bit more of a deft foot in terms of applying the throttle so as not to burn the tires off. With all that said, Adam Stevens is a 2-time champion in the sport at the Cup Series level with Kyle Busch, and has brought that same savvy and expertise over to the 20 team since he moved over back in 2021. So I have no doubt that they'll have a car capable of winning next week, and maybe one that'll, hopefully get to go the full 400 laps, 600 miles, unlike last year where we got too much humidity to go back green. So, yeah, I definitely think that this could be a spark, but I still think they've been hot from the 3-race winning streak outside of a few, poorly timed incidents that have happened, such as the Homestead weird spin that Bell had coming out of turn 4 that kind of ruined that day, and then the Talladega stage 1 crash with him and Chris Buescher where the two Christophers wrecked into the wall coming out of turn number 2. So yeah, I think that the 20 team is still as strong as they have been all season. It's just that they haven't had the results to really back it up just yet, and I think that Charlotte could be the home of their 4th win.
Yeah, I think we've been saying, not us per se, but collectively the last 2 seasons, that Joe Gibbs and the number 20 team and Christopher Bell are the sleeper. I don't think you can say that anymore. Looking at the last two heartbreaks in the playoffs, and I certainly think they're on a run here, besides anything that happened there at the All-Star race, considering they're defending Coca-Cola 600 winners. Now we go from Adam Stevens there, like you mentioned, to Coleman Presley and Joey Logano there with Team Penske. They were on older tires and blocking Bell as much as he could, and Christopher Bell got physical to get around Logano by running him up the track. Logano said he would have spun out Bell, of course, if he got to his bumper. Bell responded by saying that he's seen Logano do much worse, so he's not quite intimidated as Logano may have hoped. So was this fair racing, in your opinion, or was Logano's anger justified?
Joey Logano's being a sore loser. Like, let's just call it what it is. You're racing for $1 million. The race doesn't count towards anything. You're racing for strictly a big, fat check. And Christopher Bell saw all 7 of those digits and raced Joey Logano accordingly. And to be fair to Christopher Bell, I don't think he did anything egregious at all. He raced Joey Logano to about as fairly you can race somebody that races the way Joey Logano races on a week-to-week basis. I am positive if we comb through all the visual evidence over the past 5 years that Christopher Bell's been in the Cup Series, that we can find plenty of examples of Joey Logano either moving or nudging him out of the way in a points race and Christopher Bell doing nothing in return about it. So I have to imagine, given that Joey Logano loves to sign checks that he can't cash in terms of making contact with other drivers, that this is just another instance in that string. So I just think Joey Logano needs to realize that the promoter caution is the thing that he should probably be mad about, because I think had that race gone green, he probably wins because he's way better at conserving his tires than Christopher Bell is. But, if he wants to be mad and put that chip on his shoulder in any way that he can, then more power to him. But I think that he's being a sore loser, and this does not reflect well on him to be whining about somebody nudging against his door when he has been known to ship people out of the way that are in his way to win a race. So I just think that he could definitely benefit from some self-awareness in this situation, because for him to act like this is what Austin Dillon did to him at Richmond last year.
Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah.
Like it's just such a mismatch of actions to reactions in my mind.
Yeah. And also Joey Logano having a problem with something that is a gimmick is a little humorous to me, just a little bit, considering his very fortunate career.
I mean, he's still won 37 races. Even if you take the championships out, the guy is still an all-time great in the sport. But yeah, those 3 championships benefiting explicitly from this goofy format. Yeah, it's definitely a little on the nose, a little too much on the nose. It's not been a great news day for Team Penske on either side of the aisle.
Yeah, it's been a strange sequence of days here in the world of motorsports, but focusing here on the All-Star race still, we had 18 lead changes, and that set the most all-time. And considering where the event has been before, Bristol, Texas, Charlotte, it's not hard to see that come alive there with North Wilkesboro. However, we have to point out some past races had shorter lap distances. Charlotte used to have a 30, 30, and then 10 lap heat races, and North Wilkesboro has the 250 laps. Bell, of course, coming out as the winner, said it was the best short track on the schedule. We need to give this place a points race. Considering gimmicks like the promoter's caution, which you've already mentioned, Tanner, was the on-track product better than the other short tracks we've had so far? I mean, I looked at last night, and despite the gimmick caution, I thought I would much rather see this than Richmond or somewhere where it's been a little waning as of late.
Well, to touch on that, I actually enjoyed the Richmond race until the last 5 laps because there was that option tire strategy, and I find that very fascinating, watching Daniel Suarez kind of carve through the pack over the last 30 laps. But that notwithstanding, I just don't know if I would call it the best short track, especially because I think Iowa should kind of fall into that. And I loved that race last year. That was a fantastic event, even with the terrible pavement job that I really wish they would finish. But regardless of that, I do think that North Wilkesboro probably deserves a points paying race, especially if that Bristol spring race is what we're just going to have to contend with going forward at that racetrack. It was painfully boring, and it had nothing to do with Kyle Larson dominating. It had everything to do with what was happening everywhere on back where you just couldn't pass. And there was just no tire wear. So I think that Wilkesboro in its current form definitely offers a pretty solid product. Obviously having the multiple grooves, the, kind of engineering challenge of the front and back stretches being front stretch being downhill, back stretch being uphill. I do think that that's a really interesting engineering challenge for them to have to contend with. Obviously being able to spread the grooves out from pretty close to the wall in a lot of places all the way down to on the apron. I think that that's a really nice element and allows drivers to kind of explore the track and see where their car runs the fastest. And it allows them to get out of that dreaded dirty air that we talk way too much about with this next gen car. So just to kind of hit on all the major points of this, I think that having that promoter's caution at the end, I think there was probably going to be a caution anyway because of Kyle Larson hitting the wall and staying out on the track instead of ducking into the pits. I do think that the choice to pit there or not, obviously proved pretty fatal to some people's chances of winning that $1 million. But overall, I am a little hesitant to say that the track product was completely due to the track itself, considering that, again, this is a no points race. This is something that they are doing as an exhibition. So they're not thinking in the same way that they would for, let's say, a 400 lapper here at North Wilkesboro, where they will have to save their tires significantly and they would have to take care of their equipment more, which is why you saw more things like the Ross Chastain Austin Cindric incident that even had a precursor to it. You basically won't see these guys drive like this on a regular Sunday like they did last night because it was an abbreviated event. So yeah, I don't think I agree with Christopher Bell, but it's obviously really hard to disagree based on the race that we saw last night. But even then, it kind of got, a little silly with the Michael Waltrip of it all. I would have preferred the yellow just come out at random. I think that would have been a better surprise for everybody than some goofball going up there and, amping the crowd up like it's an NCAA football game. Like nobody wanted.
Well, I thought it was, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. Go ahead.
Your communications broke up there for just a little bit. So if you're still going, please.
No. You're fine. I was telling you to go ahead.
Okay, got you. All right. Well, we're back on track here. I was kind of okay with it. I felt like it was a Fox thing to do and an all-star race sort of thing to do. I didn't really have much of a yay or nay towards it, but Adam comments up. Thank you for doing that. That was an incredible all-star race. Now bring a points race to North Wilkesboro in 26 for the NASCAR Cup Series. Also add our friends with the CW and the Xfinity Series as well. Well, that would be nice to have the Xfinity Series there. I agree. But as far as North Wilkesboro, for next year, we don't have any word on its future. My colleague at Raceface Digital, Scotty Sprinkle, actually got to speak with Marcus Smith there in Victory Lane about the possibility of having a points-paying race, and he's certainly not opposed to it there at Speedway Motorsports. But I've heard at the other side of the aisle and the likes of Dave Moody this evening and talking about how, adding more laps to it, I don't think is going to improve upon what, if you like what we had last night, having more laps, will it improve upon the product we have? As you mentioned, Tanner, saving tires and saving your equipment is going to play. Yeah, I think we had probably get a product if we have a shorter distance. But at least that's what I'm thinking. But Fox seemed to be hinting they would like to see a points race as well. Should North Wilkesboro become a points race or stay as the All-Star race?
I would like to know what the options are if we're going to move the All-Star race somewhere else. Outside of that, I love the idea of giving Wilkesboro a points race, but I did hear it brought up by Jordan Bianchi last night on the teardown that, like, even Bristol, a third full is still 20,000 more people than Wilkesboro can fit into its confines. I think that if they really wanted to make a concerted effort to get a cup date, they've probably got to put in some more seating to get it up to, I would say, around 40,000, because I think their current capacity is around 32,000. And that's really just not going to get the job done more often than not. So while it would be really cool and really nice for that to happen, it's just kind of a numbers thing with that kind of a deal, where if you bring a cup date to a track, you need to have, cup capacity accommodations. And I just don't really think that for a full-fledged 400 lapper that they really have that at the moment. But that's not to say that I don't think it can't happen, or not. That's not to say I don't think that it will never happen. It's just that I think right now, given the logistics of it all, it probably doesn't have as great of a chance of, becoming a real idea. But like I said, I think that 400 laps here, where you've really got to conserve your tires and really, be patient and, work around all the grooves to kind of see where your car's fast throughout a run. I think that will put on a really good show for our fans. But again, it's still a numbers game. You still got to bring in the revenue and the people, you got to put butts in seats. And unfortunately, North Wilkesboro is a little short on seats, but not short on butts, apparently. So it was really nice to see that turnout at North Wilkesboro, but I think they need some more stands to really stand a chance to get a Cup Series points race.
I think you're right there. And also, I kind of have an issue with the pit road capacity. I don't know what that would look like with 40 cars there, give or take. And then also all that lap traffic being a factor at North Wilkesboro. Once again, that would be something to see indeed. It would. Yeah, it would be a great thing. But you would have to have the full Cup weekend there to have that happen. John Bender comments up. We'll get to your other comment there here shortly, but he says he would like to see that just move to Rockingham. We had the seats taken out on the backstretch long ago. That's certainly a place where you could put that back if needed. But we saw the crowd at Rockingham. The fans are showing back up, at least for that first year, and some praise for that race as well. But we'll lay that there. North Wilkesboro Speedway with its All-Star Race event, and you saw the rundown there. We'll take a look at that again if we can. Of course, your winner is Christopher Bell, and you see the top five there: Joey Logano and the bitter second spot, Ross Chastain third, Bowman fourth, and Chase Elliott rounding out the top five. Other notables there, Chris Buescher there with a 10th place finish, although we saw the penalty come today with Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing. And the fan vote winner there, Noah Gregson, finishing 13th. And Josh Berry, also with a 1996 Michael Waltrip throwback, finishing there in 17th. And Harrison Burton, I thought he did a really great job with his shot there with Rick Ware Racing. Of course, fell back there to 20th, but was picking up some spots there towards the end of the event. We'll go ahead and move on to the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, who were, speaking of a points event, were there for that points-paying race and had some drama there in the final lap at North Wilkesboro with Tricon Garage's Corey Heim battling both Front Row Motorsports drivers for the win. And that would be Chandler Smith and Lane Riggs. In turns 1 and 2, Riggs drove deep into the corners and slid up the track into Heim, causing the number 11 Toyota to spin as Front Row went on to finish 1-2 with Smith and Riggs. Meanwhile, Heim finished 17th after leading the most laps. After the race, Heim made a beeline down pit road, marched straight towards Lane Riggs. Reporters on site recorded the confrontation while with Heim telling Riggs that he raced like an explicitive idiot and advised him to calm down or he will take care of him. Riggs told Fox Sports he feels he didn't do anything wrong and considered it just hard racing. He ended the TV interview by saying at the end of the day, he only cares about himself and his team. Now, Tanner, I don't think I've ever heard a race car driver say that they only care about themselves ever in my life. That seems to be a very new thing. Was Lane Riggs' last lap move fair to you? And do you see this Corey Heim feud carrying on into places like Charlotte and Nashville and so on?
Do I think this move is fair in a vacuum? Maybe. But we do not live in a vacuum, Brandon. So let's walk it back to stage 2. At the beginning of that stage, Lane Riggs started on the inside of Corey Heim, and this exact same thing already happened once. So, in my opinion, this second move, which ended in Heim spinning out on the final lap, that is not fair because of the context. Lane Riggs had already thrown a shot, in my opinion, at Corey Heim in this event. And, kind of screwed both of them out of potentially getting a stage win in that stage because that move allowed Grant Enfinger to slide beneath both of them and get out to a very significant lead. And then obviously Heim contended with Brent Cruz, who was in his Truck Series debut and impressed very much. They battled for about 20 to 25 laps before Heim was able to kind of slip past. And then by the end of the stage, Heim had gotten right to Enfinger's bumper, but Connor Jones brings out the caution, yada, yada. So, again, I think that if we're looking at the move in a vacuum, I don't think it's too bad, but you go back a week. He did the same exact thing to Carson Hocevar. It didn't work then, and he received a nice one-finger salute coming to the finish line. And I think that kind of got overanalyzed a lot this week, but I think that it kind of I don't think it got brought back into the discussion a whole lot, which I think is funny. Because there was a lot of people like, why is Hocevar mad that he was doing that? I think that this may be a bit of a pattern with Lane Riggs and how he drives. I mean, our colleague Matthew Bro posted in our Slack chat a article from 2020 from the Cars Tour where Corey Heim took exception to something Lane Riggs did to him late in a race there. So this rivalry kind of extends back even 5 years where Lane Riggs kind of has a bit of a pattern of doing this kind of stuff, which Corey Heim so eloquently put it that he needed to look into the mirror and figure out why he got here today. So I don't think the move is fair based on what we have seen out of Lane Riggs, not only recently, but historically. And I really didn't care for his attitude after the race. I feel like you not only ruined Heim's day, but you ruined Rajah Caruth's day, which you clearly just discarded as well. He ended up going from, I believe, either 5th or 6th to 15th because of Lane Riggs' reckless actions towards the end of that race. And again, I just don't feel like that was brought up enough in the ensuing controversy. I would have liked to have seen Riggs have a bit more accountability in the situation because I just feel like when drivers have this kind of mentality on their way up to Cup, they ultimately don't end up making it because they don't care about how they race their other competitors. And I don't think Lane Riggs is on par with someone like Kyle Busch to where they can kind of get away with that kind of an attitude. So I think an attitude adjustment might be in store for him, and it might be in a big way. I really hope that we don't see any sort of like direct retaliation come from this. I think that what Corey Heim was saying is that this is your final straw, and if you do this to me again, I will take care of the situation. So if I were Lane Riggs, I would probably, race the 11 truck very cleanly from here on out because these repeated incidents of you kind of Chase Briscoeing it up towards the end of these races is not a good look. People do not like people that drive like that. They do not get fans. So I would just caution him that if this is the, ideological road that he wants to travel down, that he needs to accept everything that's going to come with it. And I really don't think he's going to like what's going to come with it. So definitely don't think that this ideological path that Lane Riggs is going on is a smart one. And I would beg him to reconsider.
Fair enough. And, you don't have to look too far to see other examples of this, of two guys that have been racing since they were yay tall against each other, and, possibly putting up with the same traits of each other, and, not wanting to take any more of it. We can see plenty of that in years past. But now we'll look to the battle for the win. Chandler Smith was in the perfect spot when Riggs slid up into Heim. Smith won the race, and his teammate Riggs finished in P2. This was Smith's second win of the year, only second to Heim with 3 wins. And is Chandler Smith, do you think, starting to emerge as someone who could be the greatest championship threat to Corey Heim, if anyone's going to battle him for this title?
Well, you could look at the fact that Smith has won at Phoenix before in the truck championship race. Granted, he was not in line to compete for that title. So, you could kind of look at that a lot of different ways. I think that Chandler Smith at his best does have the speed to contend with someone like Corey Heim, but I often worry about his composure in high level moments. He doesn't seem to have a whole lot of patience for his competitors. I saw a lot of, wily antics out of him at certain points in the race that just seemed kind of extra and unnecessary. He tends to fancy himself as a guy that's, rough and tumble and likes to, get into people, but I really just don't think that suits his driving style in any way. So I think that if Chandler Smith can kind of find it within himself to mature as a racer, he can definitely be a championship threat. But to me, there's a very big reason why he never made it to the championship 4 in his time with KBM. And a lot of it has to do with how he tries to drive and handle himself. And I just think that if he calmed down and had a little bit more patience and actually tried to race his competitors, he would probably have a lot better time making it to the title race where he could then go out and win it. But until he, kind of adjusts himself to have that composure, I really just don't see him as a threat, because he tends to have the same kind of streak that lost Carson Hocevar a title, and that is just being over aggressive and not, tactically sound. So I think that maturity will show. I think that Corey Heim showed a lot of maturity in how he dealt with, everything this weekend. I mean, he could have easily walked up to Lane Riggs and started a fracas and, had that been the story of the week, and that's not what he did. He decided to scold him instead in an extremely pointed way that probably felt like a bit more of a harsher punch than an actual punch would have. So, I think to circle back, Chandler Smith has the speed to be a Truck Series title contender, but at this point, I just don't think he has the wherewithal and maturity to really carry a championship caliber team to a title.
Well, John Bender certainly agree. Well, he's very happy for Chandler Smith there in this win. But yeah, you're right, Tanner. And also, it's the shortest of the 3 Premier Series in the sport that we're going to get to the championship playoffs a lot quicker. So I would say that there's a lot to go, but really there's not too much to go for them. But they are in the busiest part of the year for themselves into the summer months. So it'll be interesting to see how he can keep this continuing. And speaking of those threats there in the front of the field, one driver we expected to be in contention for the win was nowhere to be seen. We didn't see Rowdy Kyle Busch anywhere there at North Wilkesboro. Qualifying was canceled due to rain, but they dried the track for the teams to get practice in. Busch was 21st in practice. He started on the front row because of how the lineup was set and never led a single lap. He finished 9th on a relatively quiet afternoon in the 07 Spire Motorsports Chevrolet. Are you surprised about Kyle Busch never being a factor in that race?
Not really. I think that for all of the talk about how the trucks went, I want to say 20 to 21 races without having a single overtime period, I think that we forget that a lot of those drivers are tenured and have been in the series for a long time to this point. And by long time, I mean 3 or more years for most of them. So not only are they racing around each other a lot and have at most times a lot more respect for their competitors, I also think what comes with that is a broader familiarity with the vehicles that they're driving. And Kyle Busch only gets to drive these trucks 5 times every year, and for whatever reason wastes one of them running at Atlanta, which doesn't really require, a ton of skill compared to, managing your equipment like you would at North Wilkesboro, for instance. But I think ultimately what Kyle Busch was out there for was to get faster in the Cup car on Sunday night. I think that it was more of an R&D run for him, more or less, to kind of feel out the track, kind of see where the speed was at, kind of see where different drivers were running, and just general research. I don't think that, with Spire entering 4 different trucks with 2, non-traditional drivers in the race, you had Sammy Smith in the 7 truck. Your only veteran on that team right now is Rajah Caruth, and he's only been in the series 2 years. This is his 3rd. I just don't think that that's going to be a recipe for success, even having someone like Kyle Busch in the stable for that weekend. It's just not a track that he's really familiar with and obviously has no documented success at to this point. So I think that Kyle Busch was probably not so much out there to win, but so much to go out there and learn about the track, considering it's still relatively new pavement that they're running on that is still kind of finding its personality, more or less. So yeah, I think that I wasn't really surprised that Busch didn't contend. It didn't seem like, outside of Rajah, that any of the Spire trucks were really all that strong. And that probably still has more to do with him being a veteran of the series that races every week, compared to someone like Kyle and Sammy Smith, who don't run too often. So that would kind of be my summation of his weekend. And I think it did pan out for him in Cup. He did have a pretty strong run going until that final pit stop, and he just, obviously didn't execute there at the end. But Kyle Busch had a very solid run Sunday night, and I think it benefited, from him running in the truck race on Saturday.
I will say about Kyle Busch at Atlanta, though, you can only call it a waste if he didn't win. But
I guess that's true.
He did get the victory, though. So I mean, and in the end, it sort of worked out in his favor there. Let's go ahead and move on to ARCA East and the Cars Tour. Before we do that, though, John Bender did leave us some comments. We thank you, sir. Look, DJ McLeod is in the Spire truck this weekend, and so is Busch. Also, Luke Heim was in the championship 4 last year and lost. So go Chandler Smith. Thank you for your comments there, John.
Okay.
At Flat Rock Speedway, though, at ARCA East and Cars Tour, it was another win for Joe Gibbs Racing in the ARCA Menards Series East, with Max Reeves driving the number 18 Toyota, becoming the 2nd driver in history to win his first 3 career starts at ARCA East, joining the likes of Will Rogers. Entering a race like this, many would be surprised if the Gibbs car didn't end up in victory lane. Tyler Reif was Reeves' closest challenger all evening, but settled for 2nd and was a good 3rd place finish for Takuma Koga. Before the race, Reeves said he expected to win, and after the race, he felt confident about his chances of being the first driver to win 4 straight ARCA East races. Tanner, do you like how confident he is at just 15 years old? You can't even drive a street car? Well, with a permit, I guess, depending on what state you're in.
Yes and no. Like, you should be that confident when you're driving that overpowered of a car, but also, like, you're driving the front running car, maybe have some temerity. Like, maybe have a little bit of grace, a little bit of humbleness, Like, I don't know if this car is going to stay together 150 laps, even as good as it is. So, anybody can go out there and win if they enter the race, that kind of thing. I think that, in a way, it's good that he has this kind of confidence at this age, because you can't really teach that kind of stuff. I mean, we obviously just saw a Cup guy who was apparently too quiet for his crew chief, and his crew chief got fired. So maybe, it's probably better that you are a bit more confident and a little bit more boisterous. But at the end of the day, you're in the best equipment in a field that has 3, maybe 4 competitive cars. Like, maybe tone it down 2 notches. But overall, he has the confidence because he has the results to back them up. He has been in 3 ARCA races. He has 3 wins. Pretty hard to argue against that confidence if the results back them up. Yeah,
and you saw the best of the rest there on the results page. You saw Zachary Tinkle. I believe he had a 4th place finish there to end the day at Flat Rock. And I'm sorry, that was 6th. Anyway, that was a great finish there for him. Also from Bubba's About Broke podcast, Jackson McLaren there in the top 10. Well, of course, the 15 cars there on the grid. But still seeing the rest of them there and their finishing order. We will stay here with ARCA and talk about some comments Josh Berry made about the Cars Tour getting a televised race that was dominated by the likes of Landon Lewis in prime time last Friday night on FS1 at North Wilkesboro. I want to congratulate that commentary booth as well for a great chance to show their skills there on FS1. But when asked about the Cars Tour's big opportunity in front of a larger audience, Barry said the series put on a good product that's deserving of a spot on TV. But he also took the opportunity to take a shot at ARCA, saying that the ARCA races he watches are horrible. This led to a larger online discussion with people debating ARCA versus the Cars Tour. And Barry shot, first of all, do you think it's an unfair shot at ARCA? I'll go ahead and say my opinion here. I think the way that ARCA has been trending in the last several years, I think he's got some legitimate points there as to the Cars Tour being a little fresher of a product nowadays.
He isn't wrong, but should he have said it the way that he did?
No.
Probably not. I really want to be careful because I do really respect the work that all of the ARCA teams and the people that run the series put in week and week out to put on these events. I know that they are working tirelessly to try to make the product for the ARCA Menards Series better, as well as the regional programs as well. But yeah, I'm not going to lie. I went to the Milwaukee Mile ARCA race last year and nothing happened.
Right. I mean, yeah.
William Sawalich went out there and walloped everybody. Connor Zilich ran about 5 seconds behind him most of the day. And then Gio Ruggiero kind of had some subplots, and I think he ended up 3rd, almost a lap down. Like, as much as I think ARCA is an integral part of the NASCAR development ladder, NASCAR should probably take more ownership of that property and try to help prop it up a little bit. I don't know how I would say that they should go about doing that, but we've got to have more competitive cars than at most 5 to 7. As much as I, again, really respect all the competitors that drive in that series, I can't say like I can with the Cars Tour that 1st through 20th can win. And I think that's kind of the beauty right now of the Cars Tour and the allure of it for other people is that if you're a good enough racer and you have, a good enough team behind you, you can rise from a bad qualifying spot to win the race. Granted, you probably didn't get to see a whole lot of that on Friday night in that race when Landon Lewis pretty much led from the pole wire to wire, save for 1 lap. But at the same time, that's going to happen. And I found the rest of the race to be really enjoyable watching guys like Caden Honeycutt, kind of cut through the field at different times, especially after that big accident. So I think that the Cars Tour definitely gives young drivers a better route to picking up racecraft at short tracks and, kind of get a better sense of how to control the car and how it works. Whereas ARCA is better at kind of getting drivers more experience on larger ovals that they normally wouldn't have access to without going to the truck series, which is a whole other thing that is too dangerous for a 16-year-old to really be in at a track of, grand size. anything over a mile, really. So, yeah, it's a complicated discussion, to say the least, but overall, I would like to see NASCAR, invest in their investment a little bit more with ARCA and help prop it up a little bit more to get more competitive cars in the field, because right now it's Joe Gibbs and Venturini and everybody else, it feels like. So I think people like the competitiveness of the Cars Tour and how much parity there is in it, even if they've got to deal with a little bit more caution cleanup because of it. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think both have their merits. It's just that ARCA probably just needs a little bit more of a boost right now to help enhance its product.
Yeah, I certainly hear you there, and it would be in their best interest for NASCAR to put some more propping up under their investment there with ARCA and get it. I mean, I listen. I want ARCA and Cars Tour to both be very successful and healthy, but just there are some pretty obvious differences at the moment right now, and ARCA does have that great advantage of helping drivers develop at larger tracks that they wouldn't have access to otherwise. But as far as positives for me in the past few years, covering it here every Monday night on Grid Encore, that's about some of the only positives that we've had from ARCA by and large. But we'll leave that there and get to our one shining moment of the night, as we've gone a little bit over here this evening. I wanted to go back to Indianapolis and go to the front row, because I think buried under all of this is the story of Takuma Sato starting in a one-off on the front row for the 109th running of the Indianapolis 500. A two-time Indy 500 champion is starting on the front row. And now, of course, I'll go back and say this with the help of Penske not being there to take any of those spots. But still, with the circumstances and the speed he was able to put out there, no attack, no chance. Taku still got it, and that was really impressive. He gets my one shining moment.
Fair enough. I'm not going to focus on an active competitor. In fact, I'm not going to focus on somebody that's even technically alive, but Junior Johnson is going to be my one shining moment, because he is from Wilkes County, North Carolina, and is, in my opinion, kind of the grandfather of NASCAR itself. If it wasn't for him passing on a very big sponsorship deal in 1971 with RJ Reynolds, who owns the Winston Tobacco brand, NASCAR as we know it today and this broadcast as we know it today might not even exist, because of all the deals that he was able to string together, in addition to his very successful race team. And when this track was closed at the end of September of 1996, which was about a month before I was born, he kind of signaled it as kind of like the death of NASCAR in a way, or at least in its old form. So for, him passing away in late 2019 and not being able to see kind of the revival of his home racetrack is a bit sad, but it's also a testament to, the work that he and others did around that region to, keep its spirit alive, even when everything was covered in weeds and God knows what else. So, yeah, big shout out.
I would like to think Tyson Chicken was there too.
Yes.
Yes. Scattered amongst the grounds.
Well. Yeah. Holly Farms chicken as well. So yes.
Some mini-tizers.
But yeah, big shout out to Junior Johnson and the Parsons family as well. They have all, done their fair share of work to help keep that track spirit alive, even when it wasn't hosting races. And I think that when we come away from a weekend like this, it's important to remember those that kind of laid the foundation for what came today.
Absolutely. Thank you for your one shiny moment, Tanner. And with that, that's all we have for tonight's Grid Encore show. Be sure to follow us at Grid Network TV on all our social media platforms. Subscribe to our YouTube channel under that same name, Grid Network TV, and visit our relaunched website. That's gridnetworktv.com for our latest content. As I said at the start of the show, if you really liked what you saw tonight, you can take a few minutes to consider joining our Patreon supporters, Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew, who've all helped us grow our motorsports media outlet just substantially. We can't thank them enough, and we'd love for you to join as well. If you'd rather do a one-time donation, if you'd prefer, you can choose the Buy Me a Coffee, which you see here, and also YouTube Super Chat. Those are both good ways to contribute to the Grid Network. We do enjoy our coffee here on the daily. Looking ahead to our upcoming schedule, Kobe, Josh, and Matt will be back on Wednesday for Grid Tonight. Stay tuned for our Grid Live pre-race show format, standalone shows to preview Formula One's Monaco Grand Prix, NASCAR's Coca-Cola 600, and of course the 109th running of the Indianapolis 500. It is a beautiful day in motorsports. And on Monday afternoon, Memorial Day, we'll recap the big weekend for motorsports that was on Grid Live Wrap-Up. Be on the lookout for a new episode of Women in Motorsport in the future and a full recap of ARCA, Trucks, and Xfinity at Charlotte next Monday right here on Grid Encore. Tanner, once again, thank you for being on the show with us on a Monday night this evening. Any last words before we hang it up?
That attenuator is a Dallara part, and if you all hear anything else about any other teams having an illegal one, I would not be surprised, and you probably heard it here first.
That's a point there. And I would say my last thing is get ready for the greatest triple day in motorsports. Hope you enjoy every second of the parade at the beginning of the day, and then hopefully, well, sorry, but it still looks pretty. Fair. Maybe one sweet day it will be a good race there. But then the beauty of the Indy 500, and then the spectacle of the Coca-Cola 600. Here's to the best weather, and also watching the Kyle Larson double. Lots of great storylines to follow. You won't be burned out getting into Sunday. So for Tanner Smith from Pitbox Press and Kobe Lambeth from Grid Tonight, my name is Brandon Crossland with Raceface Digital. Thank you so much for watching Encore this week. We'll see you next time right here on Grid Network.